Thank you, and good evening, everybody. Welcome along to Wednesday night midweek meditation. Again, welcome to the people here, and also to the people on the internet. And once again, just at the start of the evening, I'd just like to remind everybody that the care group telephone lines are open, and the telephone number that you can ring to speak to somebody on the phone is there on the screen for you now. And those people will be there tonight until 9 o'clock, Western Australian Standard Time. And also there on Thursday night, tomorrow night, and also Saturday night. So Wednesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays from around 6:30 till 9 o'clock. So you're very welcome to call in and talk over anything at all that you'd like to talk about. And once again, with what we've been trying to do with these talks and the just the little happenings that we've had here on Wednesday nights in the past, we've been really just trying to sort of jog along a little bit with just what the care group and what it is to listen. Just what the care group listeners try to do, train themselves to do, and to be a loving friend to anybody that might want to call in. And indeed, with the way that these talks have really gone since we've started doing them is really along the same lines of being a loving friend to ourselves in our meditation, so that we can actually be with ourselves, be with whatever trials and tribulations we may well be looking at or wanting to deal with, and just whatever comes up in our meditation. And tonight I'm going to just try and concentrate a little bit more on what it is to sort of understand the consciousness of mind, to understand what consciousness is, how it flows, and also what it's like when it's still. You'll probably understand that over the past few weeks we've been looking fairly strongly at just the stillness of mind, the still consciousness of mind, being able to look in and see what it is to be with that stillness, to be able to feel that inside ourselves, to really fully understand what it is to be with this still consciousness. Because in fact, this still consciousness is there with us all of the time. It's never ever not there. So learning to be with it is really quite a special thing to do, because when we do actually know what that still consciousness is, we can actually be with it. We can hold our minds still while we watch our lives. We've got a datum point then to be able to watch our lives as our lives move through the days and the weeks and the years and our lives, and hopefully even into next life, and perhaps even with this stillness, when it becomes clear enough and precise enough and still enough, there's even the opportunities also of understanding and being with what's happened to us before in past lives, which is very much part of the Buddhist tradition and the Buddhist cosmology, if you like. But I'd like tonight just to start the talk really just by looking, if we can, just how manipulative the world is to us, how this sense of manipulation does get into our consciousness to condition us, to, in a way it's kind of brainwashing us, I guess, too. It's not strong enough to say that. It is okay to say that this world does, in a very real way, kind of brainwash us. We become conditioned really from the very first time that we take breath in this life. You know, if we're lucky enough to have good parents, mum and dad, their mum and dad will immediately sort of step into to start this conditioning process for what is basically probably a blank canvas in terms of the young baby that they're dealing with. I mean, certainly the young baby from Buddhist terms will bring into this life conditioning from the past, from past lives. But all of that is fairly flat, I think, at that particular point in time. So when we first open our eyes and see our mum and dad are usually very, if we're lucky, and most of us I think are, most parents do have loving, most children do have loving parents, I think. You get your first taste of what the Dalai Lama pointed to as compassion, especially from your mother. This compassion that flows in, you know, as mum and dad look at little baby. It's probably just thinking of myself, little baby Dennis, when my mother and father first set their eyes on me, and I know that my mother loved me. You know, there was a great. It's never been in doubt in my mind that is there, as I'm sure it is for most of you too. Just that loving kindness and the beautiful tenderness and nurturing that sort of goes in from the very first moments that we come into this world. And that's a wonderful conditioning, actually. It's probably the start of what it is to be compassionate, where compassion comes from. Because mum and dad are looking at their child and they're kind of noticing just how helpless it is, how much it needs its attention, it needs to be nurtured. And there's a sort of a natural, heartfelt outflowing that sort of goes to that. It brings in that first lot of conditioning. And it certainly comes both from mum and dad. You know, I don't think dads are in any way shy with any of this. They feel exactly the same thing, but certainly for mum, it's probably a closer connection in the way that she feeds and knows, because the baby's been sort of carried inside her for all of those months. So the mum already knows very much what the baby's doing and what it's like. So this is really the first time that conditioning comes in. But then if you think about it after that, it's really quite a process that sort of starts to change. I mean, we're very dependent on our parents for a long time as children, that's for certain. And we will become aware and get to know very quickly just how what our parents think. What we can see is what they say, what they think is right, what they think is wrong. We'll sort of learn about all that. And all this is just conditioning that's going in. We're sort of learning, taking all this in. And then, you know, as we start to move away from the home a bit, from the cot and the cradle, we're kind of moving perhaps into the kindergarten realm, and there's other teachers that are there, people that are outside that start to have an influence over us. They start to tell us various things, start conditioning various things into us. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it maybe not so good. But your mates at the kindergarten, and then gradually we get to school, and all your mates at school are having things to say, and we're listening. We're trying to be the same as them. We try to emulate the different things that they say. So all this conditioning, what I'm trying to point to here is just how this it's not really even subtle, is it? It's sort of, when you sort of think of it like this, it's very overt, really, that conditioning that comes in. But we never really think of it like that, because when it all comes into our being, we in a way just confabulate it. We turn it into our own knowledge, and then we become like that. You know, we become the person, and gradually as our identity starts to form, we are, you know, definitely bringing this information in as our own there. We start to think about it as, this is me, this is my own stuff. And then you sort of move on to other things, and it's, you know, like even with the, you know, I quite often think about what it must be like to live in other countries other than Australia. You know, countries perhaps where there's a lot more trouble, or where maybe there's conscription. And governments start to bring in this level of conditioning as well, where they're wanting to get you into the army, and they're maybe teaching you all sorts of things that you probably never really realised you were signing up for. But so all of this happens. So if you in some countries, if there's warring going on in that country, that might be conditioning that the government wants to put in that way. If it's a nice, peaceful country, you might be lucky enough to have conditioning the other way. But basically that conditioning just comes in. And I guess it is sort of driven, if you want to think about it, is probably you go to, or you end up in, with this conditioning, really dependent probably a little bit on the karma that we kind of have inside, because all that would have an influence on the energy that we interact with as we're dealing with all of this. But I'm just trying to show this in a way where the outside world does influence us quite strongly. All this stuff comes in, all this conditioning, all this ways to be, ways of being, are really very, very normal. It's a very normal situation in our lives. But again, just we never really ever think about it. Never ever think about how it got in there. And I often think, just in this world, how many people actually are in a way doing what they really want to do in this world. There's oftentimes we'll get a job and find that the job that we're doing is really work that might be really more in the interest of the employer, and maybe not so much of an interest to you. It's wonderful when you do find a common experience like that, if you're working in a job that you really find fulfilling and fruitful and sort of in line with your own values, or what you think of your own values. All of that is, that's very good. But very often it's not that way either, is it? We sometimes have to take up work and do things that we don't really even want to do. So all of this influence that comes from the outside world, this conditioning, this external conditioning. I'm saying all this too because when we're talking to our care group, when we're training people in the care group, we talk a lot about this, about the conditioning, the external conditioning that the listeners might experience from even callers. Just being forceful in one way and forceful in another, and just how to deal with all of that conditioning. But here, what we really need to do is to be able to sort of see and notice this conditioning, and this meditation that we do is really the perfect vehicle to try and understand that. Because this meditation, once we sit and make our mind still, and we start looking back in on ourselves, we can start to see that we are, in a way. We can actually notice in a way just what makes us tick, and sometimes it's a bit of a surprise. It's been a bit of a surprise for me to see things that happen inside my mind. And a surprise sometimes even to see just things of how my body physically reacts to various stimulations and conditions that come in from the external world. Stuff that's even though I might want to control it, sometimes it's not sort of possible. It's a bit like when if you just imagine yourself, this will be a good exercise for you, you just have this lemon here, and I sort of cut this lemon in half. Just imagine sort of bringing the lemon up to your mouth and sucking in the juice of the lemon. How many of you can already feel that kind of taste, the way that you kind of grimace and sort of and pull in. So all of these stimulations, they're really some of these stimulations anyway. They're not really possible to change very much because the conditioning is there. It's part of the world and it's part of what comes in. It's the same as what the conditioning is that comes from other people and other thoughts and views and opinions and ideas that we have. But now when we start to get into this meditation practice though, we really do have a chance to sort of look at who we are as people. And it's, I think the Buddha in the usual way, when he's sort of made all these lists of things, when he's talking about the various things that he wanted to illustrate in his teachings, he's made some wonderful lists of things that allow us to really get a good handle on what it is to be human, what it is to have this human conditioning inside us. Doing that with the 5 hindrances and just, noticing our desires and our aversions. And I think in the past practices, and when we do some meditation in a moment, I'll sort of bring this up again, just this way of using these 5 hindrances to notice as we let the desires abate and we let the aversions abate in our mind, we can really just start to see what it is to be content, just very contented in our mind, just to be and sit with the stillness in contentment. And then just looking at the energies in our body, the energy that comes about from the 3rd and the 4th hindrance of restlessness and sloth and torpor. And as those energies sort of balance out, our body becomes quite still and relaxed. And when you can couple that with the contentment that comes, it's really quite a wonderful thing to be with. And then the 5th hindrance, which is doubt, that can start to be overcome with the confidence that you start to build up with the way that you can be still in this present moment. So when we start having a mind that settles into the clarity of the present moment, and maybe just as I'm sort of talking about that, I'll perhaps just sort of mention again just how important this present moment is, because this present moment is really where there is really only the reality. When we're allowing our mind to become still, we're able then to stay in the stillness and watch the conditions as they move past us, watch the movement of our mind, watch the way that our body works. And the more we can practice with this, the more you can just sort of watch it and just let it be. Just watch the way that it moves. Watch the anicca. Watch the way that everything is beginning and ending and falling and changing. And we do all that while we're just sitting in the stillness. So when this happens, we get a real chance to be able to sort of see the conditioning that the world gives to us, this external world that has such a powerful influence on us. And I'm not sort of saying this in any way to try and make it sound like that we shouldn't be being influenced by the world, because it is just natural. I mean, quite often people will talk about things like astrology, and I've had people say to me, I don't really believe in astrology at all, because I don't know much about astrology at all either myself, but I've heard people say, I don't believe in astrology at all because, how could, stars or planets sort of so far away have any effect on us? But then I just think and say to them, well, what about the sun? The sun, is all powerful for us. It kind of, and the sun is a star, and it has this great influence on us. I mean, we probably haven't even scratched any surfaces yet as to just what is sort of underneath the influences of the sun. And then the moon, which is a little bit closer to us than the sun, but the way that sort of moves around the earth and sort of causes the rising tides and the moving and influencing our bodies all of the time. So all of these external influences, they are very natural. But it's kind of a way, what I'm pointing to this for is to show that we've got quite a lot really to learn and understand and be with when we're sitting with our meditation, as we become more focused on the present moment and we start to see the reality, the truthfulness of the present moment, we can start to understand that this is really the place that we need to see all this movement from. Once we start making the present moment our datum point in life, then we really do start to turn our minds around so that we can actually see things with the right view. This is the very first part of the Eightfold Noble Path. Had to have the right view and the right intention. But the right view, I think, is that what the Buddha was pointing to is really just that, the ability to sit still in your mind and watch as all these things move past. And eventually, this is as we uncover the present moment more and more, we start to see how all of this is so important, because we move more closely to more and more stillness until we start to see what the Buddha talked about as the three characteristics of all things. So we certainly have an idea of, when we start looking at all of that, as the dukkha, and I know that I've talked about that in other nights that we've had here. The dukkha is really quite an interesting thing to look at, because, you know, at one level we can say, well, because dukkha, as it means suffering or discontent or not satisfactory, dis-ease, you could say, all of those words. But really, we kind of never really look at it deeply in that way, do we? We never really ever notice that this, what we're involved in here in this world, is really quite troubling for us. It has the potential to be troubling. It has the potential to be happy and good, and I don't certainly want to lose that side of it as well. But just the nature of this universe, what the conditions that it's putting into us. So it does have this quality of dukkha that the Buddha talked about, the very first thing that he spoke about, the very first noble truth of dukkha. And I know, I don't think we necessarily think about that really too much, just to notice just what trouble this conditioning, this external world can bring to us. But as we start to see things with the right view, we start looking from the stillness, we can start to see that. And as we see that more and more, we can start to allow ourselves to start that process of letting go and relaxing, letting all the tensions that the dukkha brings into our lives, to letting all that relax, so that we can get closer and closer to the present moment and uncover it even more, go deeper into that present moment to really start to see certainly this first characteristic that the Buddha talked about, the dukkha, but then certainly to see the second characteristic, which is anicca, or just the impermanence of just what is there in all of these conditions, the way that they move and change constantly, never ever giving us any ability to stay with anything for very long. You know, I go and get a haircut, and you know, it just seems a very short time, and I've got to go and get another one. Or if I'm mowing the lawns, you know, if I'm looking at all these negative things that I've got around the maintenance of ourselves, and just how much energy we put into looking after ourselves. Really, the way that we've got to eat, you know, usually 3 times a day, and then we've got to go to the toilet and poo it all out, and then we've got sort of teeth. You know, I'm just sort of at the present time kind of doing the dentist thing, and you know, there's all that sorts of stuff that happens. And I've just had one of my little nephews had a really bad bicycle accident where he sort of come off a BMX bike, and he's been in hospital and very nearly died because he damaged an artery that was going into his liver, and he's been on a ventilator and in a coma for quite a few days. Happily, he's well and happy again now. But I mean, all of these things, it's you know, you can see that dealing with the world is really, it is dukkha. You know, we've got to really sort of look at this with open eyes to see that, you know, that we have, when we're grabbing onto this world and holding on to our lives in the way that the Buddha suggested that we do, there is trouble to come with it all. I mean, there's also, you know, I don't want to sort of lose sight of the happiness and joy that all this can bring too, because there's great beauty in the world. There's great beauty in our bodies. I mean, it just never ceases to amaze me when I kind of sit meditation and just watch the breath. Just this beautiful breath, the way that it comes in. I mean, I don't even really try. I don't have to try to say, oh, next breath come, it's just there. You know, the next breath is just, it comes in and then it flows out, and as it flows out, then it flows in. It's a beautiful experience. And the whole body is like that, you know, just like with my young nephew, you know, his body, the way that he's been able to sort of get well and heal, and all the wonderful people that have helped him at the children's hospital there. I mean, just, you know, it's wonderful to see, and wonderful to see how our bodies are able to do that. It's a beautiful thing to see. And this world has so much beauty in it. And in its own way, it is truthful, because everything is in balance out there, in fact. You know, like there's all of the... in fact, even when physicists try to record this world in mathematical equations, they only really know that things are right when things are in balance, you know, and they're probably just trying to balance up either side when they're trying to make equations about the universe and how that might work. But at any given time, you know, it doesn't matter whether the balance is like this or even. The world is always in a state of perfection, really, just the same as we are, all in a state of perfection. But we notice this dukkha is there. And we notice too the way that the anicca, the movement of our mind, is also there as it's moving and changing and making everything. In some instances bringing things to us, but in some instances taking things away from us. Like, you know, for instance, my eyes now. I mean, I'm really literally struggling to see everybody in the hall. I mean, I can see you, but I can't. It's very difficult for me now to resolve any of that. But resolve your faces in the way that I used to be able to do it. But that's kind of just a function of getting older, and I've sort of had the joy of many years of having good eyesight, and so, you know, these sorts of things, they swap and they change, but everything is still in perfection. There's a state of perfection there in the way you look. It's just that things are changing. My hair used to be black. Hard to believe, really. I've got somebody that writes on the internet that calls me the white cap. So, yeah. So all of these changes, the second characteristic of all things, is there to see very clearly when we're sitting meditation. And then the third characteristic of not self is also there to see. But that's sometimes quite difficult to look at, isn't it? To actually. To realise that maybe there isn't a self there. I mean, the Buddha says that that's the way that it is, but we need to see this for ourselves, don't we? We can't just take that necessarily on trust or as a dogma. I mean, the Buddha really did encourage us all to be our own monitor on this sort of thing. So, you know, we all need to know this for ourselves, not just sort of take things on board, but just looking at that no-self aspect. But it's a very beautiful thing to notice, though, too, because it sort of just, again, gives us the courage and the heart to be able to get really very comfortable with the present moment, to get comfortable with the beauty and the peace that's there in the subtlety of the present moment. And we'll look at that in a minute when we just start some meditation again. But I'd encourage all just to look at that, because the subtle beauty, it's very different than the beauty that's there in the extremes. When we get right out into the extremes of things, you can get very diametrically opposed conditioning that happens to ourselves. You can sort of have the extremes of maybe being a car racing driver, or I see on the internet sometimes these people actually riding bicycles, they're doing backflips and turning around. It's almost as if there's no fear that people have when they're doing these kinds of things. It's really quite surprising. And the possibility of very serious damage to themselves, that seems to be there. But still, people want to do this out at the extremes, don't they? They want to climb Mount Everest or dive to the deepest places, go off to Mars and things like this. But when you're kind of seeing all this from the stillness, you're kind of noticing that you really do start to see the dukkha that's involved in all of that. That there is these sort of balances that are really so topsy-turvy and can bring us so much trouble and heartache sometimes. But when you start to get to that balance point there, when we're starting to be right comfortable with the present moment, it's quite beautiful to notice the subtlety of the beauty. There is something about the subtlety of a beautiful thing when you can sort of notice and really kind of allow yourself to absorb into the beauty of a subtle experience. And that is right there in the present moment. We can really notice that subtle, beautiful experience. It's just right there. And to me, it sort of does trump. Probably shouldn't we use that word, but it trumps all of the extremes. The extreme for me anyway. The extreme feelings and ideas of beauty and pleasure that you can have. The pleasure of the subtlety of the present moment is really quite special, quite something. And not only that, you kind of, when you see and you realise the beauty of what you're looking at there, you're also noticing that you're very close to truth. You're really close to reality, because you're not sort of caught up in the movement of your mind. You're no longer sort of out there moving with the mind, moving and with the because I probably need to say this too. When you're out there in the extremes, there's really a great ignorance of the reality of really where you are. This is why the Buddha talked about greed, hatred and delusion. This delusion. We're kind of caught in this world where we're kind of we're really in a way infected with what the external world brings to us, the manipulation of our being that the external world brings to us. But we really have no idea about that we're caught in it, because it's just so natural to be moving along with the world as it moves. But as your mind starts to stop and stop in the present moment, this is when you really do start to notice that movement. You really do start to understand and see what the dukkha is, what the anicca is, but also the anatta, the no-self side of it, and just to be really blissfully present in the experience of those subtle beauties that are right there in the present moment. So I just wanted to, I'll leave my comments there and we'll just move on to do some meditation now, where I'll try and incorporate some of that into the meditation so that you can experience this and start to see what a great pleasure it is to do this meditation, and what a great thing. I mean, whenever I think about this too, I never stop thinking about how grateful I am to the Buddha to have really thought of all of these things up. I mean, I notice this when I'm sort of with any kind of thing of beauty. You know, like for instance, I'm just sort of thinking in terms there now. The film Amadeus. I mean, I've always sort of liked classical music, but I don't really know. I've never really fully understood why I did. But if you get a film like Amadeus, which I presume you've all seen there, but in Amadeus there's Salieri, who is one of the main. Mozart's nemesis, really, but he was the protagonist in the film, but he's kind of like the narrator, and he's narrating, sort of telling us why Mozart's music is so beautiful, and when he's just in his mind when he's reading the music and just seeing the layer after layer of music and it's playing, it's just it's a beautiful thing to see when someone can teach you, when someone can show you, point to, the beauty of something like that. I sort of just love doing that. I remember once when I went to JB Hi-Fi before it ever became big. It was just down in Eastvic Park, and there was a man there. I was just saying, I can never hear any of these high frequencies or low frequencies, and can't you? He says, sit there. So he sat me down, and he had this big wall of speakers and everything there, and he spent about half an hour with me, happily. It was a very sort of generous thing, but he just sort of played these different sounds through all the speakers so that I could actually hear them and learn them, and be with them. Someone that just spent time with me to do that, and I've never ever forgotten it. Now when I listen to different things, you can hear all those different frequencies, the different sounds, the basses and the deep basses and the high tones and the low tones and everything like that is involved in it. And the Buddha, I think, is a bit like that. He's kind of given us all these teachings and told us how to enjoy this pathway, this pathway to enlightenment, this pathway to the truth of the way things are. So anyway, if you would like now to just make yourself nice and comfortable, back nice and straight, and just that little curvature in your back's good, and top of the head pointing to the ceiling so that your ears are nice and sort of straight up and down. Right hand on the left, as I've always sort of say, I quite like just the gentle holding of the hands, and just so that you can feel the tingling. Because when that tingling gets going, it's amazing how you can have that tingling in a way jump onto your skin and on your body, and because it is there all the time, the same tingling, it's always there. But when you relax into it, when you absorb into it, you can sort of feel it, and sometimes it almost feels like your body is like floating off its cushion, off the cushion. It's not doing that, but it sort of feels like that because your whole body sort of fizzes. It's effervescent. It's this beautiful, and this is sort of a real hallmark of what relaxation is. But it can start just with, I've found anyway, it can start just with your fingers, just feeling that there, and then as you're kind of relaxing deeper and deeper into your body, just to notice that, how this relaxation spreads. So closing your eyes and closing your mouth as you're breathing through the nose, your tongue resting against the palate. And we'll just do a quick sweep through the body, and then I would just like to do a little process of grounding us. So we'll just start off at your feet and just moving from your toes through your heel from your toes rather, through the arch of your foot into your heel, then up through the articulation of the ankle, into the lower leg, calves and the shins. And all the way through here again, it's just always possible to, if you just linger around a little bit in places like this, you can usually deduce a lot from what's happening inside your body, and even just feel and experience the what it feels like where the body's hard, where there's hard bone and where there's sort of softer tissue. And where there's maybe some tensions there, you can just allow the tensions to relax. So they're moving up from the legs through the knees and into your thighs. You feel your bottom sitting on the seat. And then up into your stomach, lower back area. All those little gurgles and rhythms that are there. All the movements. Maybe even just share a bit of time to just observe the wonder of it, just the wonder of all of this body working the way that it does so perfectly. Day after day, year after year. Beautiful perfection. Then moving up into the chest. And there's usually rhythms you can feel in there, the heart rhythm, and perhaps even a little bit more of the clattering, the clanging and opening and closing, different vowels. And always remember just to, if you're feeling a bit sort of low or not quite, just to put a smile on your face. It always helps. Just to have that happiness there. Then as the arms hanging down by the sides, bent at the elbows, through the forearms, into your hands and then into your fingers. And then just noticing, feeling the way that all that beautiful effervescent feeling, the energy that's flowing, then moving up into the neck area and into the head, behind the eyes and round your lips especially, and up into the head. Round the top of the head too is usually a good place to find a lot of energy happening. And then as you feel your body relaxing, and just to notice that, just to notice the way it's relaxing, and then just to perhaps just spend a little bit of time anchoring ourselves into the earth. Just feeling the way that we are pulled into it, pulled through our bottom onto the cushion or the chair. And you can feel the energy of the gravity. Moving, you can imagine it moving right to the centre of the earth. And we are part of this earth. Eating the earth up and then giving back to the earth. And then as you're sitting here too, just to imagine these field lines, these energetic lines of force that run right up into the universe, connecting us to all of the stars and the planets and all of the galactic systems. because we are part of all that too. We're part of the universe. Our body is made from the stars. All the elements come from stars. So we belong. And you can sense that grounding, the way that we ground to the earth and connect to the universe. And now we start to think about leaving the body behind and just moving into the mind. And now that the body is relaxed and feeling good, we move to the mind. Mind is like the sixth sense. And we can see that, or start to see that this world, this body, is really all inside the mind. All the senses, the five senses of our body, they subsume inside the mind. So we can know why. The Buddha said, mind is chief. Mind is the forerunner of all things. And we can start to relax our mind in the same way that our body is relaxed and still. Just noticing what it's like to have a mind that's not moving. Yes, you're listening to the words that I'm speaking as they begin and they end inside your mind, but your mind is still. The stillness is becoming apparent because your mind is not moving. You can just experience the coming and the going of my voice as it begins and it ends. But just to know that, to know your mind is not moving. What does it feel like? You may be starting to, even right now, starting to feel the silence of the mind, the stillness. In the Zen tradition, they talk about the roar of silence. Can you start to notice the roar of silence? So the mind's starting to relax, and as it relaxes, you can now if you would like, just to move your attention to the breath. Just notice the breath as it comes in and then flows out. Notice that your mind can be still. It's still, hopefully still, as you're watching the breath. Because there's no need to make a commentary of the breath. You can just watch, just know. Just know that the breath is moving in and then moving out. Beginning and ending. Hopefully you can know that the stillness is still very present. The still consciousness of mind is there, as it always is. You notice how delightful it is just to be still, watching the breath. But there's no commentary being made. The mind is just still. And we're just observing, just knowing. Just the beauty of it. The joy. It is as if every experience in the universe is just right there. It's complete. truthful. This is the reality of the present moment. We can start to see how it's so compelling. We're not lost in the extremes. We're present in the subtlety of the balance in the heart of the present moment. In a moment I'm going to ring the bell, and as usual I'll do that 3 times. And as ever, it would be good if you can keep your eyes closed over that time and just do a bit of a stock take. Just notice what the mind feels like. What it feels like now compared to when we started. And at the end of the resonance of the 3rd ringing, you can just gently come back to the room. So, I trust you enjoyed that meditation as much as I did. Actually, it was quite lovely. Well, it is always lovely being with the stillness. So it's just coming up to 8 o'clock, and we've kind of tried to make a bit of a rule of not sort of letting these things drag on for too much longer. But if you would like to come and join us for a cup of tea over in the kitchen, we'd very much like to see you there. And if you've got any questions, you're certainly very welcome to come and ask about them. So I know in this room there's sort of several people that are very, very proficient meditators. So I thank you for your patient listening tonight and for the opportunity to present this to you. So we'll leave it there now, and what I'll do is just invite everybody to pay respects to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha if you would like to. So we'll see you again next Wednesday night for the midweek meditation.